Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. Always grateful to have the other Real America's Voice anchors almost walking through the shot. Carrie Sheffield is here in studio, and I'm glad she didn't walk through the shot, but nice to see her anyway. Welcome to the show. If you saw me go like that was Carrie. The great thing about this studio is all open space, so anything can happen at any time. And just the way I like it. I want to get started today. There's so much going on out there, and we've got so many great guests over the course of this show for you. And I want to start with, I think we can start with Joe Biden from what he was just saying. He just gave a 19-minute long, I think, maybe even shorter speech about racial justice and equality in the United States. He read entirely from a teleprompter and entirely, see another one of them there behind me, entirely, he's coming back. Biden was entirely on prompter, and it was monotonous. I don't know if you saw it. If you didn't, actually you might want to go and take a look at the White House YouTube page at some point later on in your day. Don't do it now, you're listening to me. But it was interesting. It was really, I think, informative about the state of mind of this president and how compos mentis he actually is. We'll have Mike McCormick, who's written the unauthorized biography of Joe Biden, on in just a second to talk about some of the predictions he was making this morning on the War Room Show and where we've ended up since. But I want to bring you this clip really quick because it kind of summarized the whole thing. And if this was Donald Trump, we know that right now Jim Acosta and the entire corporate media establishment class will be losing their minds over this. Let's play it.
Mr. President, what's the top driver food about?
You.
Mr. President, what's the top driver food about?
You.
What happened there, what you're seeing there is the end of the speech. It's 18 minutes in. He goes and signs these 4 executive orders. He's fumbling around for a pen in his pocket for about 30 seconds. There's actually 4 right in front of him on the desk. And as I say, if you want to go back and watch that later on in your day, it is very informative about the mind of the president. But he was then asked, he didn't stop to take questions about the speech he had just delivered, let alone anything else. But he was asked by Fox News' Peter Doocy, what did you talk to Vladimir Putin about? The reason the question was asked was because about an hour before, Jenssaki, his press secretary, was asked the question, what was the president going to talk to Putin about? And Psaki gave this kind of fumbling answer, as we've become very used to from Psaki. Kind of fumbling answer, going, well, you know, the call is scheduled, and I think it's even scheduled for like right now while I'm talking, and I'll get you some details later. But then when the reporter asks Biden what he talked to Vladimir Putin about, he goes, you. He sends his best. Now, that is funny. It is a funny quip in the moment, and it shows that Joe Biden still does have some of his senses and wit about him, right? That's fine and fair to say. But can you imagine if Donald Trump did that? He would be accused of, he's not answering the questions. He doesn't want to take questions from the reporters. He ran out of the room without being transparent. He wouldn't even talk about the press conference that he was holding on the day. I just wanted to bring you that level, you know, that hypocrisy that we're seeing from the press. And it is not lost on me, by the way, and I will get Mike McCormick's thoughts on this in the next segment, but it's not lost on me how the faces of the reporters in the room with Jenssaki are falling every time she stumbles her way around an answer. You can see it. You can see that they really truly expected her to be even better. Kayleigh McEnany was actually phenomenal at that podium, right? You can see that the reporters are going, I can't believe she's doing this. I was live tweeting my way through the Jenssaki press conference earlier, and I just want to bring up on my phone in front of me my social media accounts, because I went through. Jenssaki said, for all intensive purposes, for all intents and purposes, she said sex instead of steps. She read a generic statement from a State Department fact sheet when she was asked a question about Venezuela as it pertained to government policy. She admitted that Joe Biden is not increasing the goal of vaccinations from Trump's 100 million warp speed target. Honestly, if she hadn't posed with a communist logo on her head, I'd start to feel sorry for her. But let's take a look at something that Jenssaki is really good at. Let's roll the clip.
And President Biden
We're going to keep playing this until the break because there is so much of it, and I don't want to subject you to just 2 minutes of this, but it goes for 2 minutes, and it's going to just keep playing there. It's going to play us out. This is Jenssaki, and look, I don't want to be mean-spirited about this. Of course, she's nervous up there. Anybody would be nervous up there. I would probably, no, actually, I probably wouldn't be, but most people would be nervous up there. But it's very clear she's had days now. She keeps reminding us how many days she's had, actually. If you listen to the press conference, she's had 6 days up at that podium now, and every day it actually seems to be getting worse.
Sure.
She's still going. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, Mike McCormick is the author of the unauthorized biography of Joe Biden. We'll get his thoughts on what we saw this afternoon from the president. I'll ask him what he thinks of Jenssaki's performance up there at the podium. Stick around, more National Pulse. We return in just a minute. All right, welcome back to the National Pulse. I just want to remind, or tell the audience rather, what Jenssaki's performances have reminded me of. It's actually one of my favorite situational comedies, How I Met Your Mother. Can we roll the clip of How I Met? It's usually The Simpsons that's predicting the future, but this time I think it was How I Met Your Mother. We got that clip?
And President Biden.
So whenever she does an interview, you have to drink every time she says, but
Does she really say but that much?
That night, we found out just how much she said it.
Oh, that's great. But
Nice.
this wasn't your first spelling bee, was it?
Nope, third.
Oh, good for you. But
Do not attempt the Jenssaki drinking game at home, ladies and gentlemen. My next guest is Mike McCormick. Mike is the author of 15 Years a Deplorable, but also Joe Biden Unauthorized, which you can actually get right now. It's a great book full of just behind-the-scenes information, recollections, stories about Joe Biden. Mike, I want you to tell the audience just what informs this book. How long did you work with and around the former Vice President and now President Joe Biden?
Yeah, hi, Raheem. Thanks for having me on. I worked with Joe Biden from 2011 through his leaving 2017.
Yeah.
And I had worked for I worked for three presidents. So I worked in the Bush administration, then the Biden administration. I worked for a year for Donald Trump, who was by far and away the best president we'll ever have, in my opinion.
What was your role?
I was a stenographer with the press office. So in the press office briefing room, there's a special seat on the side of the room where the stenographer sits with a recorder to make sure that all the questions that are asked are fully audible and transcribed for the official transcript. And then on top of the briefing room duties, we would go into the Oval Office and do interviews if the president was being interviewed by a press. We traveled on Air Force One and Air Force Two. What I did with Vice President Biden was mostly work out of our office that was in the Eisenhower Executive Office building. But when he traveled abroad, I traveled with him. So I traveled with him to Ukraine, and I traveled with him to Poland. I traveled with him to Russia. I traveled with him to China. And that's what's in the book, is basically what I saw that the press didn't report. And as someone who had worked with President Bush and saw what the Obama administration was doing, I could sort of judge, critically what was working and what wasn't. And then when Trump started saying, I want to do A, B, C, and D, I was like, this guy's going to win. And he sure did. That's what the first book is about.
Mike, you saw, now I've caught the ums from Jenssaki, and in whoever's in your role now is probably using the U and the M keys quite a lot as stenographer, probably wearing them out quite quickly. I wanted to ask you what you thought of today's Biden press conference, press event where he signed those 4 executive orders. Not so much about the content. We've got Bruce Lavelle on the show with us later on today to go through some of the content that's in those executive orders. But I wanted to ask you specifically about Biden himself, the demeanor, the length of the speech. We heard from you on War and Pandemic this morning about what you thought might happen. What exactly, in your, I would say expert opinion about Joe Biden and the way he speaks, the way he holds himself, the way he thinks on his feet, what did we see of the old, rather witty, quick-witted, lengthy speaker Joe Biden, and what did we see of this new doddering Joe Biden?
I found it really interesting that it was a full coverage. They took the small group of the press in there, so they had a limited press access. Small group, and it was really, actually, I was looking for the speech online beforehand. I couldn't find it because it's only by one pool camera. So if it's a big event, if it's a big speech they want to promote, why are they narrowing the aperture? Kind of strange to me. So that's one thing this White House is doing, is they're trying to sort of hold back access to what Biden really is. I thought his demeanor, I didn't hear the sort of the joke at the end. That is kind of the old Joe Biden. You're right. And I did think that the demeanor, it's a topic that he's gone on at length about in the past. And he read it, like you said. He read it word for word. That's really unusual for him. 17 minutes for a speech about racial injustice. And he, glossed right over 4 big points. To me, he in the past would infuse his speaking with personal anecdotes about what he did here. He'd tell about his stories, what he did as a youth trying to, work with the civil rights groups in Wilmington, which, sometimes he stretched those stories out a bit and was a little dishonest kind of in how he said it. So this was a very sort of managed speech. He's the managed president. He's like a placeholder to me. He's just sort of sitting there. The other thing that was really interesting to me was he talked about Susan Rice, Ambassador Susan Rice in there. It sounds like she's really pushing the agenda on what this racial equality is, and Eric Holder. I think those are the people behind the scenes that are working with probably President Obama. I don't think he mentioned President Obama. He said Obama-Biden administration maybe once or twice, but he didn't talk about what we did, Barack and I. He never said Barack and I used to do this. There's nothing like that. So it was very strange, kind of distant speech from what he has shown a lot of passion for.
There was nothing extemporaneous about it. There was nothing about his career that ostensibly, at least he likes to make the case that he's been involved with race relations and equality for his entire life. There were no personal stories. He didn't go off on any tangents. And I understand that the press really didn't like when President Trump went off on tangents and started ad-libbing and telling his own stories and all this. But you would have thought the press would want Joe Biden to add his kind of sprinkle of color from his glorious career as this grand statesman of unity, right? This is the claims that they always make about him, but there wasn't any of that today. And I think it was really informative. I paid very close attention to what you said this morning and what to look for in that speech from Joe Biden. Mike, hang around a moment. I'm gonna bring it back after the break. I've got a proposal for you. I want you to be our Biden mental tracker from here on out. We'll bring you on every so often to kind of track what percentage his brain is operating at. Bring Mike McCormick back in just a second. There's a lot to cover at the moment, and there's a lot from Mar-a-Lago, the new office of the former president. I wouldn't have called that myself. I would have gone with the office of the 45th president. Actually, most GOP voters, according to Rasmussen, say a third party is a good idea. I understand the trepidations that people have about that and about splitting the vote. We can get into all of that. I'll give you the UKIP perspective. In fact, what I'll probably do, don't take my word for it. We'll bring Nigel Farage on the show at some point in the near future, and we'll have him talk through the idea of setting up another party. Nigel was a Conservative Party member, was told, don't split the vote, fix the party from the inside, everything will be fine, mate. That obviously never happened, and had to set up the UK Independence Party to fight smaller elections, not big national ones, but smaller elections, threaten the Conservative Party's vice grip around right-leaning voters in the United Kingdom, and then and only then did they get the pledge of a Brexit referendum, did they get the follow-through, did they get a Eurosceptic government, and did they get Britain out of the European Union. Slightly different systems, not all that much different systems, by the way. The United Kingdom is not a proportional representative democracy. It is a first-past-the-post system, much like most of the United States electoral races are. So I think there's a lot of parallels and a lot to learn in that regard. But a conversation for another day. I just got an email from Rasmussen up in my inbox, which is why I wanted to mention it to you. Get the old noggins going out there. Your views, honestly, are more important to me than mine, and that's why I appreciate so many of you chiming in with us on social media, whether some of you are still on Twitter. I know Gab is incredibly active right now. I go through as much feedback there as possible on my private Discord chat channel, which you can join by going to thenationalpulse.com/support. And there's a whole host of other ways that you can get in touch with us as well. The live chat in the morning shows and the afternoon shows. Believe me, I probably look at 10,000 different opinions every single day, and I try and aggregate as much information as possible and bring you the news at the same time. There is more news to talk about as well. Natalie Winters will be joining us in the next segment to talk about who Solar Winds, you know, that company that was at the edge of the latest massive cyber attack, who they're hiring as their lobbyist representatives in Washington, D.C. Probably won't surprise you, but it's news nonetheless. Want to bring Mike McCormick back into the conversation here. Mike is the author of 15 Years of Deplorable and also Joe Biden Unauthorized. I want to make sure that everybody knows where to get this. Yeah, and Mike, forgive me, because I know it's still a great place to go for people. It's easy for people to go to Amazon, but I don't want them to go to Amazon. Where can they go to purchase this book that isn't Amazon? And I think you get a portion of the donations, a portion of the purchases donated, rather, to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund?
That's right, yes. You can go to my website, www.joebidenunauthorized.com. And 10% of website sales go to the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund. I was a stenographer in the court system. I actually used to listen to the grand jury testimony in the Lewinsky hearings.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day. Yes.
Wow.
Which I don't talk about.
I said I had a proposition for you. I now actually have two. My first is I want to bring you back on as much as possible to do the Joe Biden mental tracker. You said it was 50%. He was operating at 50% compos mentis the other day. What is it today after you saw what you saw earlier today?
I got to stick with 50.
Okay, I mean, that's fine.
50.
That's fine. My second proposal to you is that we meet up for a good old, what we call a PFL, a proper something lunch. The polite version is a proper Farage lunch, which means big steaks, couple of bottles of wine, and I want to pick your brains about things that are in the book, but also things that you may have even forgotten, you know, in vino veritas, after all.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot. I mean, that book is the tip of the iceberg. And once again, www.joebidenunauthorized.com. I'll give you the 10,000-foot view.
I want to make sure that everybody goes and gets that, and mine's actually on its way to me right now. I really can't wait to dip into it, because when you read these things, Mike, especially I have this, where I read these things and I'll go, Oh my goodness. But he hasn't told us about either what led us up to that or where that went or what was going on in another place of the world at the same time and all this stuff. So I'm sure that there are stories upon stories upon stories that you could tell, that you would remember and recall, that I really want to pry out of you. So I'm going to go through this book and we'll have a chat and a sit down after that. Just finally, before we let you go, and I'm really appreciative for your time, Mike. Look, you've got Jenssaki in there at the moment. I know you didn't see, you told me before the show, you didn't see Jenssaki's performance up there. Believe me, I was no fan of Sean. I love Sean Spicer, nice guy, but I was no fan of him up at the podium. I think he was always on his heels, always on his back foot, always taking incoming. Jenssaki's getting treated with kid gloves by the media, and she is still unable to handle herself up there. What kind of advice, what kind of reflections do you have on that role, and maybe what Jenssaki needs to study up on?
You know, I think Jenssaki, to be honest, I think she was kind of the Obama insert. You know, Joe Biden had people that were working for him in his campaign. They did a great job. And all of a sudden, Jenssaki sort of stepped in front of it. There may be some behind the scenes tensions. And that may be what she's kind of, exhibiting, that she's not getting a lot of support. But it surprised me when they popped her in there. I don't think she's that good. She wasn't that great as an assistant press secretary when I worked with her. And, there was people that were working for Biden that I thought were probably better experienced, and I don't see why they didn't get the job.
She doesn't seem to be furnished with a lot of the information that you need up there as press secretary. So maybe it's not even her fault. Maybe, as you say, there are some behind-the-scenes tensions going on there, and people not giving her the information she needs. Mike, just tell us finally, where can people get access to you? Are you on any social media sites?
Yes, Joe Biden Unauthorized on Twitter. Joe Unauthorized on Twitter, and I'm on Gab, Joe Biden Unauthorized.
All right, Mike, we look forward to welcoming you back soon. I'll be in touch about that lunch. It's on me, okay?
Great, Raheem. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, that's Mike McCormick there. We're looking forward to working with Mike a whole lot more. Just a real stand-up guy who served in a role and then saw that so many things weren't getting covered and took the chance and took the time and the effort to inform people, wrote these books to inform people of what was really going on behind the scenes. Now, I want to get behind the scenes on what was going on in Ukraine. Mike said he went to that Ukraine trip. I want to understand everything that happened there, and we'll bring you any news that we get and any recollections of Mike's that we get along the way. All right, we're going to be back in just a moment with Natalie Winters. She's got some news that we can talk about on air with you guys about SolarWinds, the latest hack, who they're hiring as their lobbyists. Stick around, stay tuned. The National Pulse returns in just a moment. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a whole segment in the future about Joe Biden's brain, or lack thereof, right? And it's kind of funny, it's kind of not funny actually, because what effectively we're saying is that this doddering old man is not well and he's being used by a political party as a front man. And it's kind of not funny, but on the other side, if that's the reality they want to present us with, then I am going to run with it. So we're going to have a cool feature every week. We'll bring Mike McCormick on. There'll be a wipe. We'll do a jingle. We'll get Natalie Winters to sing the jingle. Joe Biden's brain. And then, like an animation, his brain will pop open, Mike McCormick will pop out, and we'll do the whole thing, okay? That's the new National Pulse segment. I'm deadly serious. Natalie Winters joins us now. Natalie, I need you to, can you play a piano or something? I need you to start work on a jingle.
I actually can. I grew up singing, and I can play the piano and the recorder.
Okay, well, there you have just, a recorder, because that's, or better yet, a slide whistle, right? That signifies Joe Biden's, because it's only going to go this way, so it'll be whoop, right? All right, anyway, fun's over. Fun time's over. Let's talk about the news. This is what people tune in for. The news, Natalie, what were you reporting yesterday? It's not been seen anywhere else. This is why we exist, ladies and gentlemen. This is why Natalie Winters gets paid the big bucks. Because the rest of the media completely fails to track these things. nobody wants to talk about who's lobbying who and, you know, where their connections are or anything like that. And then there are massive stories. The SolarWinds thing. Do you even remember that? I'm talking to you guys and girls at home. Do you remember what a big deal this was? The largest cyber attack in American history took place about 3 weeks ago. We've already forgotten about it. Nobody's asking questions about it because guess what? They're too busy impeaching Trump for the second time. Legislators, lawmakers should be on Capitol Hill demanding answers about SolarWinds. How were U.S. government departments targeted in such a way? What data came out? You see how I can go from jocular to anger very quickly. This frustrates the heck out of me. But Natalie, now an even further astonishing development in this story.
Yeah, well, while Congress is busy impeaching President Trump, SolarWinds is really padding up with an extensive team of lobbyists. And it's interesting when you look at the firm they hired, which in just, I believe, about a month, they've paid out $130,000 to this legal firm. It is none other than DLA Piper. And folks who read the site regularly might remember that we had exposed this site a few months back as being the law firm that Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, has served as a partner at since 2017. What's more, we also dove into the Chinese Communist Party links that this law firm has through their personnel and the clients that they represent. But what's interesting about this lobbying registration, which again is just available through government filings on the ProPublica database, is that DLA Piper was retained on December 16th, 2020, which in the world of the establishment, in the world of DLA Piper, you know, Joe Biden was essentially president then. So they essentially retain the former firm of the vice president's husband to become their lobbyist, acting on Capitol Hill, ostensibly in and around executive agencies at the White House. And the lobbying registration specifies that they would be, quote, providing information to Congress regarding the Sunburst cyber attack on SolarWinds. In other words, really dictating and setting the narrative on what happened. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Obviously, it's still early in the administration, or the regime, as you and I would say. But even CNN has kind of pressed the Biden regime to take further steps on the SolarWinds attack. They published a piece talking about mounting pressure on the Biden team to do something with regards to the SolarWinds cyber breach.
That was me, by the way, texting Natalie Winters just to check that her thing was off.
Okay. I'm on Do Not Disturb.
Mischief making live on air. Natalie, we appreciate the update. The story's up on thenationalpulse.com. You saw it on your screens there. I want everybody to make sure that they're sharing these things. We are going to keep digging into these things. And by the way, I've decided having fun along the way, right? There is enforced fun here at the National Pulse. We'll be enforcing fun very strictly. But we're going to keep doing the news that Axios won't go into and Politico won't get into. What's the new one? Fishbowl or something like that? Punch Bowl? I don't know. Whatever the new one is. There is a new one called Something Bowl, set up by another one of these Facebook. By the way, they're all funded by Facebook. They're all sponsored by Facebook. What's Raheem talking about? I mean, let me rewind a bit here. Axios, Politico, and this Fishbowl, Punch Bowl, I don't know what it's called. They all have at the top of their newsletters every day, brought to you by Facebook. Facebook lobbies, pays hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, into Washington, D.C. every year to influence these media outlets to service news that suits them and to bring their opinions to the D.C. types who are subscribing to the Axios and Politico newsletters. No wonder they won't cover these things. They won't cover real stories about DLA Piper, its links to the Chinese Communist Party, all of this. It's all tied up together. The big tech firms, all of it. But we will keep doing it. And I will not be taking any money from Facebook. Not that they've offered. Natalie, your thoughts in 90 seconds on Jenssaki.
Well, it's really interesting. She seems very unprepared. And it's interesting. I focus on what she says with regards to China. It seems to be a mix of talking points and ums. It's interesting. I think you tweeted about it when she was talking about Venezuela. She literally read from a fact sheet on the country. And I'd say that response is better than how she's talked about China. The only thing that she really knew about the Biden regime's approach to China was that it would be an approach of, quote, patience. There's a really good clip where she's actually pressed on a story we had up at the National Pulse about how the Biden regime revoked an executive order banning China from our power grid. So she didn't know anything about it. She just said, she said she'd get back to the reporter who asked, probably hasn't. I think the reporter who pressed her on that is now seeing calls for her to be removed from the White House press pool. So that is my take on Jen.
It's a good take. I agree with that take. Natalie Winters, thank you so much for joining us here today and bringing us the news about SolarWinds and Kamala Harris. Doug Emhoff, DLA Piper, and the Chinese Communist Party. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in the next segment, we've got Bruce Lavelle, who was Trump's diversity director. I want to ask him about what we actually heard from Joe Biden today and the steps Joe Biden is taking on equality and race. Are they any good? We'll be fair. We'll play it with a straight bat. We'll go through the details. Stick around in the next segment. Bruce Lavelle here on the National Pulse. Well, Bruce Lavelle has been the executive director of President Donald Trump's National Diversity Coalition. And I want to bring in Bruce right now. Bruce, thank you so much for making the time for us this afternoon to talk about what Joe Biden actually said this afternoon. Now, I listened to the 18 minutes, 19 minutes that he was up there, entirely off prompter, entirely on script. As Mike McCormick told us, nothing that we have known about Joe Biden and his kind of rambling and kind of enjoyable rants that he's given on this subject in the past, right? He can talk for hours and hours. It's mostly bluster, but it's kind of enjoyable to watch, as circus clowns often are. But there was none of that Joe Biden. All that there was kind of, today we are going to sign these 4 executive orders and what these executive orders say. And honestly, I was expecting more. I was hoping for more. Nobody hopes for the President of the United States to not be in a fit mental state. But it does seem like that's the case. So take us through, Bruce, your perspectives on today's events. Was there actually anything good in there?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Listen, I was sitting there trying to, and let me be honest for all the viewers, I'm really in my heart as a Christian trying to give everyone a fair shake and a chance to okay, regardless of what happened, we're going to build it back better next time, another election, that's another subject. But honestly, when you talk about diversity, you talk about multiculturalism, that's my wheelhouse. I mean, fortunately, we run one of the largest diversity coalitions in a Republican candidate's history, as well as the president's. And you saw the results, Raheem, in the 2020 results in terms of highest black voter turnout since 1960 in Lincoln, the Latino vote, 41%, Jewish American, 30%. And the list goes on. And there was a reason, because of the president's agenda and the proactiveness of looking at the disparities in Black America and minority America and look, what the heck you got to lose? You tried it this way for many decades. Look at your roads, look at your schools, give us a shot. And you saw the results. It actually could have been better if we didn't have to fight all the networks. But thank God we got this great network that can at least we can have a voice or at least articulate what's really going on. And thank you for having me. So I saw this rambling, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that, okay, how about let's start with repenting and going back and apologizing for the Clinton crime bill? How about going back in the 80s when you deemed as a sitting senator to show crack cocaine have more severity than powder? How about just embracing the fact that you spent 8 years as a vice president with Obama and did nothing for prison reform? How about the things that you created as 47 years, Brother Raheem? Hear me on this.
Yeah.
All this time to have great ideas, initiatives. Now, all of a sudden, it had the appearance of who are you talking to? What are you doing? But most of all, what you said earlier before I came on and before you introduced me, is I've always said, I have doctors in the family. This right here, sir, is elder abuse, how they set Joe Biden up. I'm serious, guys. Forget about all this Republican, Democrat stuff. Something is not right with this man. It's sad. It's very scary that handlers and family and people around him set him up and kept him in the basement and navigated everything around him. And you saw is I'm going to sign these executive orders. I mean, that's true. That's a little sarcastic, but it's true.
Right.
And the fact that Kamala Harris is standing real close by, watching him like an eagle eye, which that's another subject too. But it doesn't surprise me. And it's such a disservice of the American people. And one of the reasons how that prevailed, my brother, is the fact that the mainstream media and most of the other outlets sanction and stop voices like mine. Pastor Darrell, who has the SmackDown show on Saturday night, great show. We all started this coalition to put all the Muslim Americans for Trump, Indians Americans for Trump, Hindu Americans for Trump, Haitian Americans for Trump, African Americans for Trump, Hispanics for Trump. You name it. You can go down that list. We tried to touch every single culture because we knew if we didn't band together as one and bring all the cultures together and come into agreement on these agendas, it was going to be tough because we know what the left likes to do. They like to pander. They like to go out there and make all these promises and say these things and then come back 4 years later. But we caught on to that. And you notice they kind of pushed our message out because we were being effective. So it doesn't surprise me of the typical same old playbook. It's actually going to get worse. I hate to say it because he didn't learn. He didn't learn that Opportunity Zones actually lifts and helps Black people and minority people build businesses that creates, watch this, generational wealth, which is what I have in Georgia. My generational wealth to my children's children. And to look at a comprehensive look at some of these prison reform, 20, 30 years for weed and nonviolence. We need to relook at this, the disparities of Black men being locked away from their homes. He saw this back in the Trump Towers in 2015, I mind you. I was there when he talked about that and wanted to get Black unemployment really low in the Hispanic communities and build the units back of family. Why not continue that? And then you cut off insulin, my brother. You cut insulin off. You know that's devastating in the Black community. And the answer, I know the answer why he did it, because of pharma and the special interest groups that were like, well, Joe, we're not making any money. Can you unravel this? Listen, we can go on and on with this. Listen, I really want everyone to be successful. But when it comes to cultural diversity issues like this, sir, is deep to my heart. I'm in a civil rights town. My uncles marched in the civil rights movement. They know what it's like for water hoses and dogs to be sicked on them. My uncle had his truck blown up in 1960 for organizing Black farmers just to vote, just to get to the polls. And now we have another level of voter suppression, unlike you've never seen. Don't you dare go over there and look at President Trump or those Republicans. We'll demonize you and we'll cancel you. We'll tell people not to patronize your business. We'll tell people not to talk to you. We'll call you all types of names. We'll come after you. Ladies and gentlemen, what else is cancel culture? What is voter suppression? I just named it. And he's part of that legacy of 47 years. But I say this, sir, I put this back on the backs of the American people. Pay attention to your local elections. City council, state house, Senate. Those are the ones that affect you day to day. Prosecutors, district attorneys. You saw there's a certain person meddling around funding district attorneys across the country. There's a reason for that, to get the grassroots so they can get this level of control of suppression, especially keeping us, my people who look like me, in a box and quarantine and say, you vote over there the way we tell you. Don't you dare come out of that box. Sorry about being long-winded. It's very sensitive to me about this subject. I apologize.
No, Bruce,
I yield back
Bruce,
to you, sir.
That was genuinely one of the most powerful segments we've done on this show. If you were going long, you would have heard from me. That was absolutely amazing. And perfectly timed as well, because we've got to go to a quick break.
Yeah.
But stick around, Bruce, because you said a lot of things there, and I want to unpack some of them, especially for younger audiences who might not know Joe Biden's history on so many of these issues. Just want to go over them in a little bit finer detail here, crime bill, and so forth. Stick around, stay tuned, Bruce Lavelle. We return with the National Pulse here on Real American Voice in just a moment. You know, I really meant it when I said it. That was one of the most powerful segments I think we've done on this show. And what was even more powerful is what Bruce is telling me in the breaks that the audience isn't getting to hear right now. And Bruce, I want to bring you back on. And I was going to ask you, maybe we'll have time for this later on in the segment. I was going to ask you more about the detail, some of the finer detail about Joe Biden's history on all these things. But you started talking to me about something in the break. I hope you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind telling that story, I think it's incredibly important and powerful. I think people need to hear it. If you don't mind, just take us through your personal history.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I appreciate it. Well, you know, one of the things, like in getting back to the question about Biden's speech and everything, and getting back to the quote, since he was on the subject of cultural indifferences, Black America, Hispanic America, and he was, pretty much his pandering statements there, is the fact that the fact that President Trump came on and brought about the conversations on the pro-life versus pro-choice conversation. And you remember now, for the audience, remember, President Trump is still the only sitting president that attended a pro-life rally. And,
right.
and let me share this with the viewers that I actually had a conversation with him back in 2015 on his plane. A little something about my background. My parents, my biological mom was a German Jewish woman, and my dad was African American. And of course, in the early 60s, interracial marriages in a lot of the states were forbidden. It was against the law. And we generally didn't survive. We generally were aborted. We had pretty much a 10% survival rating. It is what it is. It's a reality. But by the grace of God, my biological mom, who I never met, put me in a home, and a beautiful Black family adopted me when I was 3 years old. So it's always been in my heart. I was never dark enough or light enough or whatever, but I always stuck out in the family. They always thought my dad was in the military. I thought, is that a war baby? But what it did, it touched in my heart on diversity. And I love, as you introduced me, diversity coordinator. That's something that's very, very dear to my heart, because I realize that cultural reconciliation is not a government policy. It's within the heart. If you go somewhere and you're African American or Hispanic American or Indian American, and everyone is opposite of your culture, and everyone stops and looks when you walk in the restaurant, then you smile. And you might not know the language, but you have to get uncomfortable in order to get comfortable. And that's the thing, when every politician starts talking about, we got to get race relations and this and that, usually the ones who advocate that have not challenged themselves to get out of their all Black communities, all Black churches, they're all white churches, they're all white country clubs. And this is a little sensitive for all the viewers, because this is something that you got to ask yourself. I remember when I was chairman of the party, I was the first African-American chairman in Georgia 12 years ago. And I used to get, Chairman Lavelle, how do we get more people of color in the GOP? Easy. I got a question for you. In the last 6 months, 300 people in the room, Raheem, how many of you have had another person from a different culture at your dinner table breaking bread? Raise your hand. Not one hand went up. I said, I'll make it easy. How about a year? One hand went up. I said, ladies and gentlemen, there's your answer. It's not a policy on the governor, the senator, or the president. It's you by the people. If you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're Christian, go out your comfort level and break bread with another brother or sister who has a different color, or a different religion, or whoever, or may not even believe, and talk to them. Get to know them. Keep the hand out. Keep the conversation. Don't slap the hand back, because then you can't have a conversation. That's why whoever runs, Biden, whoever, and they talk about this, the government needs to do race relations. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not the government. It's not President Donald J. Trump. It's not President Biden. It's you. It's me. And you ask yourself, what have I done to reconcile this week or last week? Challenge yourself. Challenge your kids. Right. Are your kids playing with one culture? Challenge them.
That's so right.
I don't know.
That's
Sorry,
so right.
brother.
No, Bruce, I wish the nation, as it got to hear Joe Biden just an hour ago, could have heard you instead. That is absolutely the right way. Bruce, I wish we had some more time, but we're up against it here. Can you just tell our audience where they can follow you, where they can get more from Bruce Lavelle?
Well, it's Bruce_Levell. That's my Twitter. And then, of course, I'm on Facebook. And listen, I got all these social. I ain't going nowhere. I'm going to stay in the fight. I ain't canceling. I'm out there. You can do whatever you like. Whoever you are trying to cancel me, I'm still here. And I'm still going to be in the fight. And I know the president's watching. And Dr. Gina, hello. Big shout outs to you. You're doing a great job. Love the network, by the way. Love
you are one of our favorites, and you're welcome back anytime, Bruce. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Raheem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just amazing person, amazing spirit, amazing soul. You can see that. It comes through. It's very, very hard to keep a happy face on when you're talking about such strife as well. You can see the wedge being driven by Joe Biden up there. Again, it's I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? That was effectively the crux of the speech that we heard today. They're not there to help. They're proving every day that they're not here to help. The left media are proving every day that they're not there to help. They're not there to inform the people. No, instead, what they're doing right now, You look at people being arrested right now. Who's being rounded up? Who's losing their TSA pre's? Whose bank accounts are being lost? Who can still order on Uber Eats? All these things that they're taking away from people as a means to whip them into ideological shape. And all at the same time, they're using the words of none other than Adolf Hitler to beat us around the head. The phrase, the big lie, is often attributed to Goebbels, but it didn't come from Goebbels. Actually, there are very few academic citations whereby the big lie, I think there are none, even. You can trace the big lie back to Goebbels, that famous old quote. In reality, it came from Mein Kampf. It came from Adolf Hitler's book. He was saying the big lie as a means by which to attack German Jews. He used the big lie to describe people who he said were a danger to the state. And we're seeing that again today. The big lie that President Trump told, the big lie that Rudy Giuliani told, the big lie that Dr. Peter Navarro told, the big lie on war and pandemic, that is using Hitler's words. And that's what the corporate media is doing. Half of them, most of them actually, over half of them, probably don't even know that they're getting the citation wrong. But some do, and they're okay with it. And think about that. It is our lead story on the National Pulse right now. We've gone back and done a fact check about this phrase, the big lie. Please check it out for yourselves. It's comprehensive. It's an actual fact check, not like one of these lead stories, Reuters, trash, 200-word ones. We put some time and effort into this. And if you like our work and you want to support us, you can go to thenationalpulse.com/support. Stick around and stay tuned. David Brody and the Water Cooler up next. War Room at 5 p.m. Thanks for tuning in.